Hi, everyone. Welcome to the EO Wonder podcast. Today we have Jessica Chang, the CEO of WeeCare. She has the largest childcare network in the United States that's committed to bringing affordable care to all families. Welcome to the podcast, Jessica.
Thank you, Kalika. It's great to be here and happy Friday.
Happy Friday. So it is March and it is Women's History Month. And I'm so pleased to always have these incredible female founders on our show. But for you to start WeCare, it was a little bit of a long road. I'd love for you to share your journey with our audience.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people don't know, but when I was in college, one of my degrees was actually in early childhood development in psychology. And that was because when I left for college, my parents decided to have another child, which generally doesn't happen for families. And when my brother was born, he was actually born with autism. And growing up in a traditional Chinese family, my parents just thought he was going to grow out of it. And so I went and decided to study psychology. It was really a way for me to create a understanding and help my parents understand, like, hey, this is something that's forever, but there are ways that we can help to normalize it or help to understand it more. And I remember, like, one of the biggest things back then was him getting a Montessori education, and that allowed him to really feel comfortable in his own skin, which, last actually in May, he's going to be graduating from USC. So obviously there was a definitely help for that. But after college, I really didn't use that degree at all. And long story short, like almost 20 years later, I have my own child. And at that time, childcare never kind of came back. And when I was looking for childcare, I was really surprised that there wasn't any options available. Most of the options were really unaffordable. And on top of that, there was like 6 months to 2 year wait lists. Yeah, to be frank, I was so surprised that I literally asked the director, and I was like, so you're telling me before I get pregnant, just like maybe when I get married, I should go sign up and I should put
You need to be put in a wait list.
Correct. And I was like, so you want me to put TBD on when their birthday is, TBD on the name, TBD if we're ever going to have kids? And she was like, yeah, a lot of times most parents do. So surprised by that answer. But it really didn't make sense to me. And I, unfortunately, like most women, that was a detriment to me because I needed to return back to work. And I couldn't because I didn't have childcare. That also spurred me to really go look at the industry deeper, because this is an issue and every single woman or family faces it when they decide to have a child. Why isn't it that we haven't spent more time trying to resolve this? This seems like a big barrier for even the economy to grow. And when, basically, long story short on that, what I realized was that the supply was dwindling. There was not many childcare providers that wanted to stay, and not many people that wanted to get into the childcare space. I actually became a preschool owner and operator as well, because I really wanted to understand why that was the case. Like, if you have so many families that need care, can't we really try to get more providers? Because it seems like demand and supply should meet in the middle. And I realized that the industry wasn't really supported. Most childcare providers, and I think this is a shock to many, preschool teachers are getting paid $20,000 a year.
What?
That's normal.
20,000 for full time?
For a full time, you're actually more there. You're probably working 9 to 10 hours a day, taking care of people's screaming children, and you get paid the same amount of money as you would having a degree in education, as you would someone that doesn't have a degree and is flipping burgers, or even less.
Right. A barista. Oh, no, actually, the baristas actually get paid more.
Exactly. And so it just didn't make sense. And for those that were not really wanting to stay in the industry, no one was really out there to support them either. They had to be the administrator, they had to be the teacher, they had to be the small business operator. That's a lot of things that you have to do together. And if you can't, and back in the days, it might have been easier, right? You could put out a notebook and be like, hey, sign in, sign out. The expectations from parents these days are like, whoa, why aren't you putting photos of my kids?
Exactly.
It makes it harder. And so no wonder why the supply was actually decreasing. So, and that's really the reason why we started WeeCare.
And so what's unique about WeCare is that you're actually using technology, right, to be able to connect people. Tell us a little bit about how WeCare works and how you became the largest network in the United States.
So I do want to clarify, we are the largest network of small childcare providers. And that is really important because, well, from day one, our mission has always been, how do you make childcare accessible for all? And really that question comes down to, on one side of it, for families making it affordable and accessible. And on the other side of it is, well, how do you support that childcare provider, that teacher, that person, right? And how do you support them to make more money? And how do you help them operate? So that's actually where our technology comes to play. Our technology we are a marketplace. So we built a platform that allows parents to find care and manage that care experience afterwards. So receiving those photos, knowing that they can set up automatic payments and don't have to write a check. By the way, I was still writing checks for my kids. So this is a really, really recent phenomenon.
And
And
how old are your kids now?
my kids are 6 and 4.
And this was a couple years ago,
Yeah,
writing checks.
exactly.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
think most families still write checks. So just letting you know, that's still the norm. And then on the other side of it, it was really to become a business in a box solution for providers, right? We would help them with their CRM system, their curriculum making, their billing and payments, their communication tool set. So really helping them on those things that they weren't good at. They want to focus on, how do I provide the best care for the children? Last thing I want to think about is, how do I send videos or photos to a parent?
Or how am I getting paid? Am I getting paid all the money that is required as well?
Exactly.
Wow, that's so fantastic. So what was the first step in you going from, I guess you were working full time,
Mhm.
right? Then you went to running a preschool to running WeCare. What was that journey like? Or
Yeah.
maybe, yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, it was the preschool was never the end. It was for me to really understand why. And I've been an operator, I've been in finance a lot of my life. So it was me saying, this affects me so much because I had to leave my job. How can I personally try to understand it and also try to solve it? And if I can do it, can I replicate it? And if I can replicate it, can I actually create a sustainable solution long term for everyone? So end goal was always, how do I start a company like WeCare? But there was a lot of, I don't understand enough and I need to be in their shoes to get it. So that's
So
how we
what
started here.
what was the first step? And
Yeah.
like, did you come up with a brand or
Mhm.
maybe tell us more about that process?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, you got to find co-founders. This is really important because, you can't really do it by yourself. Some people can. I wasn't one of them. I knew I had skill sets that my co-founders have that I don't have. And then it was really understanding the market even further. We knew we wanted to be the solution for that provider, that person that is actually providing care. But we didn't know what was the right method to do so, right? Like, how do you pay someone more, but at the same time, reduce the cost for a family? So we spent a lot of time exploring different childcare solutions, right? We talked to childcare centers, we talked to nannies and babysitters, we spoke to home daycares, and ultimately what we were trying to maximize for, which was, well, pay people more, reduce the cost on the other side. And that really became apparent when we really did a lot more research on home daycares. So there's actually 150,000 licensed home daycares in the US, and almost no one knows about them. And it's funny because generally a parent who knows about a good home daycare isn't willing to share it with anyone else because they're like, this is great. Why would I try to share it with someone?
It's my secret. Right.
Exactly. And so for us, it really became like, when we found that, we're like, oh my God, there's all these people doing this, but how are they doing it? Oh, actually, it's really hard for them. What do they need help in? Oh, actually, they're not operators. So can we help them be operators? How much could they potentially make if they were good operators? Oh, they could make 3 times more than they could as a preschool teacher. That's getting to sustainability. Is it more affordable for families? 100%. It was 40% cheaper. So we knew when we discovered that home daycares were a viable solution, it was the aha moment for us. It was like, this makes sense.
That's huge. 40% savings. And that's because they're using your platform to cut out all the other things that they need to do, right?
Yeah. This was for families, it's overhead costs, right? Like you have it at your home, right? It's not in a center. So you're not paying for rent. Well, you're paying for rent, but it's your own rent. You would have to pay for it anyway if you were a teacher working at a center. But you can cut off expenses like having to worry about construction or repairs. This is your home, right? You have a lot of tax savings. So that not having that overhead gives you that immediate savings for families. On top of it, we do save them money because we can help them operate, maximize the capacity. So providers making more money, family also feels like, look, this is something I can actually afford. And it's a lot more convenient because it's my neighbor. It's the person that lives below me. It is someone that lives 2 blocks down where I don't feel like I'm driving 30 minutes to get to.
So I understand. I think we have a mutual friend, Alice. She had told me that it was really difficult for you in the very beginning to raise money for your company, but then after COVID or during COVID, things changed. Is that right?
I mean, generally, as a tech company, we are not a sexy company. Like childcare is not sexy. And so for us, it was really hard sometimes in the beginning trying to explain to someone that's never had to deal with a childcare issue why it affects every person. And what COVID did was it took every single kid and put them in the house and said, guess what, mom and dad, or mom and mom, or dad and dad, you're going to have to figure it out. And that's when people really suffered because they were like, oh, it is an issue to me. I can't work and also have children at home. And so I think that was a turning point where people started, wait a minute, childcare, yeah, it's not sexy, but it's a necessity. And it's every person's right to have this. And I think it also gave us a clear understanding that childcare as an issue is not just an issue for families and childcare providers. It's a public issue. It's a employer issue. If families have the childcare they need, they go to work. There's a stat out there that says from an economic development standpoint, because women left the workforce during COVID and they didn't have childcare, we lost $9.5 billion in the economy.
Wow.
That is big. And it's like, well, if we devote money to childcare, even just 1/10 of that money to childcare, it has a 10 times impact to the economy. Why wouldn't we do that? So
Exactly.
that was a real big realization for us during COVID, was that we can actually leverage employers and government to actually help with this.
So it really helped. So COVID, even though it was really devastating for a lot of people, the pandemic helped your business because it shone a light on a problem that has always existed. But the people who perhaps were investing in businesses felt it to their core.
Correct. So I think that's so important because so many times we talk about the issue, but generally when it comes to childcare, unless you've experienced the issue, it's not there. It's not top of mind. And I hear that a lot from parents, right? Like, I can't believe this was such a painstaking time for me. And it's like consistent. But it's when you ask someone that doesn't have a child, they're like, well, is it really that bad? I feel like there's like childcare providers or nannies and babysitters everywhere. It's like, well, yes, it is bad.
How did you grow your company to be one of the Inc. 5000's fastest growing private companies? I mean, you're ranked 292. How did that happen?
Um, I think it was, I owe it to my team. I think every single person that has joined our company is here for the mission, right? But whether they have kids or not, they're saying like, look, this is something that really needs a solution. And this is a basic need for every single person. It's a basic benefit for everyone. Like, we're trying to really solve a real issue. And so I think that tenacity pushes us to work harder, right? Because it's not like, oh, we're going to create the next shiniest object out there, but like, who's it for, right? But when you're saying like, hey, look, I just heard a dad cry on the phone with me saying, thank God you found me childcare after my wife died. That's a different feeling. Like, you're working for a greater purpose in my mind. And so that's, I think, really it's our team, the tenacity our team has, the passion they have for solving this, and the attitude they have too. It's like, yeah, you might say no about this, you might not understand, but I'm going to take the time and educate you. And once you're educated, you're going to be on board and you're going to love what we do.
So you are a true purpose-driven company. I noticed on your website that you actually call your employees, your family.
Yeah, 100%. We've gone remote, but back in the days, we would spend all our time together, and we would go out to dinners, go out to weekend events, because this was my family. We spent so much time talking about how we can make others better that we knew that we ourselves needed to be a family as well.
I love your core values. It's safety, education, trust, and community. Well, first of all, how did you come up with your core values? Because I know that there are a lot of companies that don't have core values. How did you come up with it? And how has that helped you grow your company?
Yeah, I think it's important because without core values, you don't really have guidance on what your company needs to like drive them forward, right? It's like, they'll be like, well, how do I look at issues, right? It's like, well, this is how you would actually be able to answer those issues. And you use the core values as your guiding principle, right? Or let's say if an employer comes to you and says, I'd like for you to really like be sneaky about something. Well, that's not part of our core values, and that's not what we believe in. So I'd rather you not be my customer, right? So it took some time for us to come up with it. We really relied on the team to ask them, like, when you think about WeeCare and what we do, what comes up? What's the word that comes up? And taking that information, that's what actually started to say, like, okay, these are the values that we can believe in, and I'm for that. I would have to say we've definitely done iterations of it, because COVID, obviously, for every single company provided different iterations. One being now you're a remote company. So we've definitely had to update those core values as macroeconomic things changed.
I love your core value trust, because I also do think that the secret to success is me able to create a space, an environment for trust. There's such an extraordinary power of trust. How does trust as a value permeate your business?
Yeah. Trust actually plays a lot of different levels for us. It's not just about like, hey, you can tell me anything. It's also about the ability for others to rely on someone and know that they're going to get those things done, right? So and also, for example, and I think this is a big one, is also knowing that whatever information you had at that time, you made the best decisions from it. And even if they might be wrong, we trust that you looked at everything and made that best decision based on all the factors that you had at that time. So that is one core value that has never changed ever since we started. And during retros, we talk about that too, because there are mistakes that we made, but it's not about pointing fingers. It's about, what did you learn? How do we get better? We didn't have this information. Now we know it. That is a plus. So it really harbors an environment where people feel like they can be honest, but also we celebrate the losses too. It's not just the wins. We celebrate the losses as learning opportunities.
What are some struggles that you had growing so quickly? And how did you, I don't know, help navigate through those challenges?
There was Execution is definitely one of them. People, I think we've always been very meticulous about how we hire and when we hire and who we hire. But when you grow quickly, you sometimes have to make tough choices because you need that person to be there. So that has been hard. I think generally we will always weigh different parts. We'll say, what is the risk of us trying to hire someone that might not match our culture, but we need that person to be there because we've got a contract we have to fulfill on. Consistent struggle. I'm not saying that it's easy and it's not a success story because we're still trying to figure that out, but it is something that I'm very frank about, saying like there is a lot of growing pain and it is hard, but you take it day by day and you try to address the ones that you can and others that you can't. You hire great people that can do it.
And do you like that adage, hire slowly, fire fast?
I think in the past we weren't good at that because you build relationships with people. The last thing you want to see is them not be there, but it is a detriment, right? Like, and it's a detriment to that individual too, because they can feel it. They're like, I'm not in the right position. I'm not growing, and everyone isn't happy with my work, right? So I think we learned a hard lesson from that and saying, yes, we need to fire fast, not just for the company, but also for the person that feels like they're in limbo.
So during COVID, I know that there were a lot of news reports about caregivers really feeling burnt out. Has your company helped with that, or how have you helped caregivers thrive and flourish?
Yeah. We have a community part of our app, which a lot of our caregivers use. And because our network is all small childcare providers, it's a one-person job, which can be even worse, right? You have no one to talk about. This is hard. And so we really pushed out a lot in our community portion of the app to drive our providers to talk. They talk to each other. They give guidance. They're like, oh, like, this is a PPP loan. How do I apply for it, right? And obviously, when we see that, we're like, okay, let's send out an article. Let's go through webinars. Let's help them apply. But they also talk to generally families too across the nation. And that has been really, like, we've gotten messages multiple times saying, thank you for helping with that. Like, I felt I was alone in this journey, but I know that there are others out there. Prior to COVID, we used to do like pizza night, where we would gather a lot of providers in the community together for them to get to know each other. No one ever felt it was a competition. It was more like, well, how do I support you? Because I want you to be successful. And then a lot of times post-COVID, we actually do a lot of provider engagement. So we will speak to our providers almost on a weekly basis just to understand, like, how are you doing? Like, where do you need help in? How much more can we support you? Are you having issues with setting up protocols? This is creating stress for how do you deal with COVID-19? Well, let us give you those protocols so you don't have to think or be stressed about it, and you have an answer for a parent.
So amazing. You also talked earlier about how, you built this co-founding team, this founding team. How did you find them? Because I know that there's a lot of women who have ideas for a business. How did you find your CTO, your CMO?
Yeah. So I knew my CMO from a previous company. And I tend to have I like to share ideas. So I like to talk about it. And I was talking to him about, I'm like, oh, I was bouncing ideas because he's our chief marketing officer, also our chief product officer. So I'm like, okay, like, how do we advertise to families more? And he would just spitball ideas. And so we started to really start honing down on that, based on us just being able to get together and speaking about it. And I trusted him from our previous work experience. He actually brought our CTO over. So he was actually playing soccer with our CTO every week. And he found out that our CTO was leaving a women's fashion marketplace. So he was like, well, you seem to understand a lot about women. And we were bouncing ideas again and again. And so that's kind of how we got together. It was really, I think all of us were looking for something to make an impact. And when we got together, we spitballed a lot of different ideas. And the one that stuck was the one that I was like personally like passionate about. I was like, we need to do this. And I finally convinced them. But it wasn't that hard because I think Jesse on one end, I was like, I don't know you, but he's like, look, my mom's a teacher. I get this. I come from a household where my mom was never paid well. She had to take from her own money, her own paycheck to buy pencils and erasers. That sucks. And so he looks at it as like, well, how do I help providers? Really, how do I help that amazing teacher to stay as a teacher? Because if we lose them, guess what? Our next generation is just not making it through. So that's how.
Well, it's so great because it looks like you all have different qualities that help grow the company.
Yes, I think it's important to recognize right from the start, what you're not good at. So I'm like, look, guys, I don't have any technology experience. I've been part of tech companies, but I am not the technical person. And I don't have experience in marketing. I know how to sell, but marketing is a different skill set. So it was really important right from the start that we had that understanding that we were a team. It wasn't just me sitting on top of them telling what to do. We were equally like a triangle. And without, like, think about a table without that triangular pattern, you take away a leg, it's not going to be able to support itself. So that made it possible. And you'll hear a lot of companies where they're like, they start with 3 founders and after a couple of years, they have 1 person left. And that's totally fine. But what's been amazing for us, we started with 3 founders. We're still 3 founders.
That's so incredible, especially because it's really, relationships are important. And it goes back to that quality of trust. You trust your co-founder to do their job. You stay in their lane. You had talked earlier about like sales. So how did you get your first customers?
So make sure you have a lot of friends on LinkedIn. And then you start approaching them, be like, I've never asked you for a favor, but can I pilot this program with you? So I would say I had a lot of good friends that were willing to try it out because to them, they knew it was important. It's hard to kind of sell something to them and be like, well, they're new in this, like, can they do it? So the first employers we brought on were friends. They're companies. And we really learned a lot. We asked them a lot of questions. We let them look at like how we were going to do this. They gave us a lot of feedback, and that really helped us hone on the larger strategy. And when we approached employers that weren't our friends, it made sense. Now kind of the other way around, like when we got our first provider, we actually said, what do we know? We know how to get licensed. So in the beginning, how we got our first provider was based on us helping teachers actually start their own home daycare. So before anyone that said, oh, how do I trust you? Well, we help people start their daycares. That's how you can trust us in helping your current daycare. And we had proof points. We did case studies, and we knew like, hey, once we had that, it was easier to showcase to other providers why the platform worked. And to be honest, some of those initial people helped guide us how the platform was created. What are you having issues on? Okay, let's go build that.
Yeah, you had mentioned earlier you provide CRMs. I'm sure that teachers, they probably don't even know that that stands for a customer relationship manager. So you had to also educate them as well with another one of your core values and how to operate a business.
Correct. I think the education component, it's funny because we're technically in education, but the education component is big because I think the reason why there hasn't been much focus on childcare is not because it's not there, it's because most people don't know about it and they need to be educated on it, right? Like sometimes when we talk to employers, they don't know what the childcare need is for their employees. They don't. And it's also a hard question to ask. Are you pregnant? Would you need childcare in 4 or 5 months? But as we've seen, what we've been really surprised about is the enthusiasm that employers have, that government has on really saying, how do we solve childcare for good? Like really solve it. Well, if you're willing to listen, we're going to tell you how. When we were licensing childcare providers, we were so astonished that, like they said, like, I would love to open a home daycare. I just don't know how. I'm intimidated by the process. I don't know what it takes to do so. So you educate them on it. You help guide them. And it's a really aha moment for them where it's like, oh my God, I didn't realize that's all the steps that are needed. I was like, well, yeah, you already had most of the steps because you've been a teacher. It's just we're helping you on those other things.
And fantastic that you actually help with the supply, because as you were saying earlier, like the supply was dwindling because it was just too hard.
Yeah. It's not an industry that people think about to help right from the start. Because you would think, and I think this is the biased view of it, you would think we would have a lot of resources for childcare because like 50% of the population has children. But because of that thought process, that's where we are wrong, right? Like that's where we're like, well, we think they have support, but they don't. And there's also a lot of biases in what we do. We really hone on that small childcare provider. We get a lot of parents asking us, well, this feels less safe than a childcare center. Actually, it's not. A home daycare provider is licensed the same way as a center is. But you've got this built-in bias that you think, oh, well, a center looks nicer, therefore it must have better care. And that's not always the truth. So it's been a process of educating, but we're happy to do so. We're happy to talk about it because so little is really focused on the issues in this space. And we need to talk about it to get to a solution, whether that's us or another company. The more we talk about it, the more we can educate, the better everyone will be.
How did you get or build your relationships with the government?
I also think COVID definitely gave us that upper hand. I think during COVID, a lot of the existing resources weren't capable to handle a sudden shift like a pandemic, right? It's like, yeah, we can get 10%, 20%. Oh, everyone's kids at home? Well, how do we quickly decide and move to that next step? And so it really allowed the government to open up and be like, maybe we need to invite some more of the private sector to help us. We need to upgrade our sites, or we need to really know, how do we distribute funds to low-income families? How do we identify that's truly low income, but real time? So I think that has been a blessing in disguise, where the current infrastructure is not as effective now as it was before. And private companies like ourselves are being brought in to really help address that or make it even more efficient.
I'd love for you to also share, you are an investor-backed company, and, just such a minute percentage of women get funding, as you know. What's it like to get funded from these companies, and are there any challenges? Do you have any successes in that area?
I think you have to have really thick skin to start off with. The expectation is somehow it suddenly happens. It doesn't happen. It's meticulously planned. You know exactly the 100 investors that you have to speak to that say no before you're going to get your first one. It takes effort. It takes a lot of stress. But also, I think there are champions in the investor community, women that are really trying to push for equitable funding, right? And you have that advantage that that they're very much prone to do so, to really speak to them, right? But I also think as a VC-backed company, you also have a lot that as women, we put that burden on ourselves, right? We want to say we are that successful company that gets to IPO and showcases that women can. And there's a lot, like we're fighting against the majority. We are the minority. We're fighting against the majority. So every day it feels like, and I think that's another reason why I'm so motivated to make this happen, is also like, I want to be able to prove, and I put that on myself, by the way, I want to be able to prove that we too can have big exits, and we too can have great outcomes for the VC funds that trusted us. And, a lot of studies have shown that women make better CEOs, but
That's right.
the only way we can show
That's
that
right.
is being the better CEO. So there's a lot on us, but I think in my case, I'm happy to take that on because I do want to prove that social norms or beliefs or biases shouldn't exist, but someone has to pave the way. So
You're also really good at articulating your passion for this industry. Is that also a skill that women entrepreneurs need to have besides having a thick skin? The ability to be a successful communicator?
I think that's probably one of the more important characteristics that anyone should have. They don't teach that to you in school, but having succinct, good communication is so important across the board. And so, but I also think that's led by your own passion. If you're not passionate about something, it's going to be very apparent. And so I think you're right on a key aspect of it is, can you communicate, and can you communicate what the pain is, what the issue is, and be relatable?
So if there are a lot of women entrepreneurs, aspiring women entrepreneurs that are listening to this podcast, it's a global podcast. What type of advice would you give someone who's starting a business?
I think one of the things that always gets women is the imposter syndrome. We always feel like we need to prove our worth, or that we shouldn't be here. Like someone else is more qualified than us to be doing what we're doing. And that simply isn't the truth. We are generally 100% more qualified than the guy that's sitting next to us. No offense, boys, but
Exactly.
like we are. And I would say that little nasty little bug keeps coming back at me too. And we have to constantly be reminded that we are the best suited to be here, and we are the most qualified to actually do this. So I think that's probably the advice I give, is like, tell that imposter in your head to go away, and that you are the one to do this, and you have the ability to do so.
What are you looking forward to in 2023?
Just to survive. No, just kidding. I say that, but it's actually like somewhat realistic. I think there are really exciting things that are coming up in our company that I am scared, stressed, excited, all in one feeling. But I also think 2023 is, I feel this is the first year that we've truly, I can say, like, I'm not talking about COVID, right? And it's in back of us. And when we're moving forward, we're traveling more, we're doing more things, we're getting our families involved. So I'm looking forward to us kind of getting back to that norm and really having a year of normal.
Are you moving outside of the United States? Or are you already global?
We're not there yet. I think the US, we need to do it well. That's a big proponent. I'm like, can't just do it like and say like, oh, we solved it for like one person. We got to really do it and really do it well. And that means there's so much more that we can do in the US. So I'm still looking for it. I think we barely skimmed the US. And so the next couple of years, I'm looking to really truly solve this, where I can talk to my friend in 5 years and them saying like, no, this wasn't hard.
You have young kids. How do you balance work? I mean, I don't like the word balance, but how do you do it with you're a young mom?
I feel like it's just survival. You know, I think my kids are unpredictable. I think work is unpredictable. It's really hard to plan. So I would say we are great as mothers at multitasking. No one could take that away from us. Like I could literally be cooking, be on a conference call while grading my kids' homework, like at the same time. It was like literally that's what happened yesterday. My accountant was saying, like, how can you be figuring out taxes while cooking and then like checking off like what activity your kid was doing at the same time? I was like, it's just we're naturally like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
But to your point, I think I cheat a little bit. I have a every Wednesday and Friday, my husband and myself, we have mandatory date night. And it's funny because it actually came from one of my divorced friends. And she was like I saw her and I was like, oh, you look marvelous, well rested and happy. Like, what is your like, what are you like, what is the snake oil that you have given me? And she was like, no, it's because what I realized is like when I have my kids half the time, the other half of the time I can be focused on myself. And then when I have my kids, I'm a better mom. I was like, huh, how do we step away from kids? Because like it's a lot. Like anyone that says it's easy, they are either they're hiding it or they're truly just an alien. Like it's hard. And so, but when we set up these mandatory date nights, even though we're like, oh, I don't want to, oh, I don't want to get out my sweats or PJs, we force ourselves because we were like, oh, you know what? The babysitter got to get up and do so. But it allows us to get away and it allows us to reset. And so that's actually my cheat, how I get through the week, balancing, well, not balancing, but surviving is because I have those 2-3 hour blocks where it's just me or it's just me and my husband.
That's so wonderful. Rodney and I, my husband, we have date days.
It's even better.
Because he, he works in the companies. And so that's what we do. And the questions I ask him are just like, how are you? And then I hear all these wonderful things that I never heard before, so I completely agree. But I only do it once a week. I got to do twice a week.
Yeah, you got date days, so you got like the other half. So
yeah,
split my day in halves.
Yeah.
No, but it's been amazing. I always tell that to my friends when I see that they're struggling, and just be like, I know you feel like you don't deserve it. You do. Get out of the house. I will look after your kids if you need be. So it's
Oh, wow. They
it's
should take advantage of that.
I know. I was like, I only said it once, so you can't take me on anything. I only said it once.
You have the CEO of WeeCare. That's the largest network. Babysitting your kids. That's awesome. That is wonderful.
It's been amazing.
What is your day-to-day like? I know you said a little bit about multitasking, but what's a typical day?
I struggle with this because like my experience has been like really like execution focused. Like I've been a COO, right? Like I like getting my hands dirty, figuring out what's going on, suggest new things. But as a CEO, my job is very different. And a lot of times it's about helping make that final decision or guiding people to where they need to be. So my day-to-day looks like I wake up super early in the morning, like do all the things I need to get my kids into school, out to school. And then the rest of my day is filled with meetings. 90% of my schedule is meetings, like talking to people, trying to help them get to a solution, helping to coach or mentor. And so by the end of the day, I'm completely exhausted and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to talk to anyone and I'm just going to stare at my kids. So that's like mostly how my day looks like.
But you're definitely, it seems, a people person. I mean, you said you had education, like early education, right? A degree in early education. You love people.
Yes,
right?
100%.
That's an advantage, I think.
It is because I think I get energized the more people I talk to, but still it's like you've been talking for 9 hours a day. You're like, I'm a little bit tired.
Yeah.
But I think like my husband is the exact opposite. He's an introvert. So every time I drag him to an event, he's like, it's so exhausting when I'm like, yeah, that was great. Let's do it again. And so but I understand, like, I think everyone needs the ability to recharge. It's just different for different people. I recharge talking to friends. He recharges by reading a book on the corner with not talking to anyone. So, and that works.
Do you have any other habits that you have? Reading, walking, drinking lots of water?
So I don't do any of those, which is
Stretching. Those are the things I need to do.
But I do have a habit, which I know this is the worst one, but I'll say it anyway. So as you can imagine, my brain is always on. Like,
Yeah.
I want to talk, I'm
Yeah.
excited, I want to, like, let's do it, right?
Yeah.
So I need to actually shut off my brain before I sleep. Otherwise, I don't get good sleep. So sleep is a habit.
Good.
But so I have a tendency to watch all the worst Netflix shows there are.
Which ones are on your list?
Yeah, so it's like the 30 minutes right before I sleep, I will watch something that is completely like makes no sense, should probably not be even made into a TV show. But it shuts my brain off and I fall asleep every time. Like, meaning my husband calls it like the worst way that you fall asleep, but as soon as you turn on the bad TV, it's like 15 minutes and you're down and you're gone. And I was like, yeah, because I have no interest in watching it. And it's so bad that like it makes me to sleep.
Wow, that's actually a really good habit. That's fantastic. Maybe I should try that.
Yeah, but my husband calls it like the worst. If you look at my Netflix recommendations, he's like, you probably pay for most of what the bad content for them to continue to produce bad content. I was like, okay.
One of my entrepreneur friends watches murder shows. I'm like, how do you even sleep after like watching?
That would be horrendous. I would not like, turn on my lights and be like, I'm just gonna, hide under my sheets. But yeah, like I watch rom-coms.
So sweet.
I watch teenage dramas.
Oh, I love that.
So it's I also watch foreign shows. I actually think the foreign ones are good, but I can't understand and I can't see far enough, so I fall asleep because I can't understand it.
That's so fantastic. Well, I think that you're just doing such a great job. You're making such a big difference for so many people. I mean, employers, childcare providers, the government, moms, dads. I mean, that story, what you said about the dad weeping because you were able to find his, childcare for his kids after his wife died. Like, that is just so amazing. And you're doing this across the US. I mean, congratulations for leaving such a wonderful legacy and continuing to do so.
Well, I hope we can do more. Every day is what else can we do? I mean, there's that saying, it's like it takes a community to raise a child. That is the truth.
Yeah. That's right.
So each part is a matter. So we need to have families involved. We need to have their providers involved. We need to have the employers and the government involved, because that's the only time that we can actually truly solve childcare for good.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and your insights and the journey of your wonderful business. And I hope that we can have you back on the podcast and see where you're at a year from now. There's all these exciting things that you're brewing in your head after rom-com movies.
Definitely nothing in my head after rom-coms. Yeah, I'd love to. And, I think this is an exciting year. I know a lot of us are fearful of a recession, but it's amazing. We survived a pandemic. Let's give ourselves a little bit of a credit.
Yeah. Yeah. So if people want to learn more about you, whether or not they're employer, caregiver, the government, how do they find you?
Yeah, so they can go to WeeCare, WEECARE.co, not .com, .co. And they can find and be guided to either our childcare benefits program, our government programs, or just be a family and they can search for care or want to join our provider network.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I just wish you all the best. You're making such a wonderful impact. And also, even now, right, you're so busy, but you're here, inspiring aspiring entrepreneurs. So thank you so much for all you do.
Of course, anything that puts a light on childcare, I will be here and talking and screaming about. So thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you, Jessica.